In this lecture, we'll be discussing aspects of aging that are related to physical development in middle adulthood. So when we use the term middle adulthood or midlife, what ages are we talking about? Well, when we think about chronological age, this really depends on who you ask. If you ask 20-year-olds when does midlife begin and end, they say midlife is between 30 and 55 years old. If you ask 30-year-olds when is midlife or middle adulthood, they say, oh, it's between 40 and 70 years old. And we see that when we ask even older adults, about half of people who are between the ages of 60 and 75 years old think that they're still in midlife. So what we see is that there's a positive correlation or a positive association between your own age and when you think midlife is, right? So many people don't want to be in midlife yet. So when they're 20 and 30 years old, they think that it's significantly further away from whatever age they are. Interestingly, we've seen a life expectancy change, a significant one in the last century. In 1900, the average life expectancy was only 47 years old, and we've added 30 or more years to this life expectancy in the last century. Now, if we look in your textbook, what does the textbook say? Well, it says that midlife or middle adulthood begins at age 40 and ends at 60 or 65 years old. For this course, we're going to say that midlife or middle adulthood is between 40 and 65 years old. When we think about middle adulthood or midlife, Bert Brum is an important researcher in this area, and he called this the last uncharted territory of the life course. There's very little research on midlife, and so why is that? Well, one of the reasons is there's no clearly demarcated age boundaries, right? People can't even agree on when midlife begins and ends. So that has made it difficult in the past to get research. There's also the assumption that was predominant for many, many decades that little happened during midlife. So why are we going to spend the money and time and resources to study it? We know that's not true now, but that reduced the amount of time that we had that was devoted to doing research on this stage in the life course. Another factor that's really important is that it is difficult to get midlife adults to participate in research. So think about this. Many people that are in midlife are very busy. They are often working full-time. They often have children. They are often very busy. They might also have family commitments in terms of not only their own children, but then also maybe taking care of aging parents. And so they're very busy. They don't have as much time as what college-age students have. And so college-age students, people in their 20s, are going to be much easier to get into do research because there's large groups of them on college campuses. We can incentivize them by giving them extra credit. We can maybe buy them pizza and they'll do some research for us. Midlife adults, it's not easy to go and find thousands of midlife adults just waiting around to do research for pizza, right? Their time is going to be much more valuable, so it's much more difficult to be able to get them into research projects. Quite a bit of aging is happening in this middle adulthood time frame, and adults start to show their aging in many ways. Typically, people in middle adulthood are still usually active and able and vital even through all of these middle adulthood years. So most middle adults, most people in midlife are quite active and still very functional, but we are starting to see a little bit of a slowdown, a little bit of an aging process. So this term senescence is the gradual physical decline that's related to aging, and it happens to everyone, and it happens to every part of our body, but the rate of decline is very variable between person to person and depending on what aspect of your physical body we're talking about. Health habits, gender, income, ethnicity, nationality, all are going to affect how rapidly a body ages. So, fun fact for you. Did you know that the average middle-aged adult gains weight and loses height? We're shrinking. So, why do older people shrink? Well, they're shrinking because the cartilage discs in their spine and the spinal vertebrae dry out, flatten, and lose some cushioning ability. So we're going to lose somewhere between 1 and 3 inches in height by the time we reach 80. Typically in midlife, we're going to lose about an inch. And there are some other factors, including weakening bones, and leading to compression of the vertebrae and some loss of muscle mass that can change our posture. Many of these normal aging processes are going to really start to take effect around age 40, so right when midlife is beginning. So when we're looking at the physical appearance of aging, there are some outward signs that are present long before old age arrives. Some of our first visible age-related changes are seen in the skin, especially with collagen. This is our connective tissue of the body, and it decreases by about 1% every year. Wrinkles are quite common to begin and be more visible and more predominant during midlife. Note we have this picture of this woman getting an injection for wrinkles. This is a non-normative life experience, so it is not common for the majority of people to get injections like Botox to deal with wrinkles, but it is something that we hear a lot about, especially with social media. So there is a proportion of the population who does this, but it's not something that the vast majority of people are doing. Another physical appearance change is our hair is going to start turning gray and then eventually perhaps white as we get into late adulthood, and our hair often is going to get thinner. Balding might happen for some men, some women even might have some thinning that might lead to some aspects of baldness. Skin is going to become drier. We're going to have some weight gain. And as we mentioned, people tend to get a little bit shorter. Muscles are going to weaken. Our lungs are going to be less efficient than they were in young adulthood. These are all very gradual changes. We're not waking up when we turn 40 years old and we're having gray hair and wrinkles, right? It's a slow, gradual process that's happening. We also have changes to our organs, including our sense organs, right? So this process of aging is going to vary from organ to organ, but if we think of all of our 5 senses, they're going to become less sharp because we're losing some of the functions, and they're not going to be functioning the same way that they did when we were younger. Changes in eyesight is one of the most obvious that we start to see, right? So nearsighted and farsightedness, both are going to increase in middle adulthood. We're going to begin to perhaps start losing some of our hearing. This is going to be a very gradual hearing loss, but it can begin in this middle adulthood time frame. And obviously, what we were doing previously, if we were listening to very loud music in our youth, we might be more susceptible to earlier hearing loss. Or if we were maybe working construction and not wearing protection for our ears, we might be more likely to see this occur a little bit earlier. Our brain is also aging. So our brain is going to slow down some with age. Again, it's a very slow process. It's not a quick thing that's going to happen overnight. But our neurons are going to fire more slowly. Messages are being sent from the axon of one neuron are not necessarily being picked up as quickly by the dendrites of another neuron. Multitasking can become a little bit more difficult. though it's important to note that we're never truly multitasking. Our brain is just flipping very quickly between different tasks. But this can become more difficult as we get further into middle adulthood. Menopause is going to be occurring during middle adulthood. This is when a woman's ovulation and menstrual periods cease or stop completely because of a drop in her hormones. Menopause is technically dated 1 year after the last menstrual period that she's had. There's a period of perimenopause that can last for several years before menopause. This typically can happen anywhere between 42 and 58, though the average is around 51 or 52. Now, andropause is a term that's coined to signify a drop in testosterone levels in older men. This normally results in reduced sexual desire, erections, speed of orgasm, and muscle mass. Sometimes this is referred to as male menopause. Testosterone levels are going to decrease at a more gradual level. They're not going to drop significantly like what happens to the hormonal levels for women. Right, so it's not this sudden drop in testosterone, and it's not an end to male fertility like menopause is the end to female fertility. Practically all the diseases and chronic conditions that are typically associated with aging are powerfully affected, either positively or negatively, by the routines of our daily life. So what we're doing on a daily basis is either increasing or decreasing our risk of many diseases and chronic conditions. So we may not have total control because there are genetic factors, but we do have some power to sway how our health is going to be. And it's cumulative over time. So there are decisions like amount of exercise. When we get into middle adulthood, we're going to be exercising a lot less than in younger years. And lower exercise rates are blamed for, we can use a rationale such as, lack of commitment, lack of support in our social lives, a community's failure for, not providing appropriate facilities. But there are so many ways that we can incorporate exercise just by walking around our neighborhood, or doing things that maybe we don't need to have a whole lot of facilities to be able to do. Overeating, especially overeating combined with too little activity, can be a big factor. Resistance to good nutrition, so either misinterpreting scientific data, having very high-fat diets, drinking or smoking, drinking alcohol heavily, or smoking cigarettes, or other type of nicotine sources, or even marijuana. These can perhaps be detrimental to our health. And obesity, right? This is a leading cause of premature adult death. That's a worldwide epidemic, followed by diabetes. And the U.S. is a global leader in obesity and diabetes. So these can profoundly affect our health. I mentioned earlier, but rates of aging are going to vary. They're not random, right? They're going to vary by some of these controllable and some uncontrollable factors, right? We can't control our genes, can't control our gender, our ethnicity. We have some control over income, education, where we're living. We have quite a bit more control over our lifestyle. And so those are the factors that we want to be taking into account and trying to have healthy habits when we're younger and continuing those as we get older. We do see variations in aging in terms of gender differences, right? So gender differences in how physical changes are experienced in midlife is an important thing also to consider. So women tend to be more focused on these visible signs of aging, like skin, hair, weight. Both men and women are concerned about these changes in women and are going to focus on them. For men, they some men are going to care about some of those visible signs of aging, but more men are going to be much more likely to focus on the decreases in physical functioning, not being able to physically do some of the things that they had done in the past. What we do know overall is that women tend to age slower and live longer worldwide than men. So we want to be thinking about, what are the factors that we have control over and what are the factors that maybe we can use to our benefit to help us age better.